This looks like something straight out of Game of Thrones or The Witcher. A world of dragons, sea serpents, and monsters that could swallow a ship whole. But this is the Carta Marina. It wasn't a fantasy prop. It was the GPS of the 16th century. Real captains staked their lives on this map. If you were a sailor navigating the freezing, dark waters of the North Atlantic, this paper was the only thing standing between you and the abyss. So that leaves us with a terrifying question. If this map was meant to keep you alive in the North Atlantic, why is it crawling with these? Today, we're overlaying modern satellite data and marine biology over a 500-year-old map to prove one thing. These monsters weren't hallucinations. They were a warning system. And the truth? It's actually scarier than the myth. The exiled mapmaker. To understand the monsters, we have to understand the man who drew them. His name was Olaus Magnus. In 1539, he wasn't sitting in a harbor in Norway. He was in exile in Rome. Imagine being stuck in warm, sunny Italy, trying to convince the Pope and the wealthy elite of Europe that your frozen homeland in the north was worth saving. Olaus spent 12 years drawing the Carta Marina. It is one of the largest maps of the era, measuring nearly 6 feet wide. He didn't just draw geography, he drew an economy. He wanted to show that the north was rich with fish, whales, and resources. But to keep people looking at the map, he needed a hook. He needed drama. So, he filled the empty blue spaces with the stories sailors told in taverns. He took oral history and turned it into scientific illustration. The result? A masterpiece of art, and a misunderstanding that lasted centuries. The Prister and the Physics of Breath. Let's look at our first suspect, the Prister. Legend says these beasts would intentionally flood ships by blasting them with water cannons. Sailors were terrified. The idea was that this monster had a predatory intelligence. It wasn't just eating you, it was sinking you with hydraulic weaponry. But let's look at the biology. When a whale surfaces, it exhales hot, moist air. We are talking about air leaving the lungs at hundreds of miles per hour. In the freezing North Atlantic, that air condenses instantly. It looks like a massive geyser. Now, look closely at the map again. Olaus Magnus drew 2 distinct pipes on the Prister's head. Why 2? Because baleen whales have 2 blowholes side by side. Imagine you're a 16th century sailor who's never seen a whale up close. You're on a boat that's barely bigger than the creature beneath you. You see this 80-foot shadow spray a 30-foot jet of water. You go home, tell a priest, who tells a mapmaker, and suddenly a biological blowhole becomes a literal cannon. The monster was real. The weaponry was just a bad translation of physics. The owl-faced assassin. Next up, the Xiphias. This creature is fascinating because it looks like a chimera, a mix of different animals glued together. It looks like a fever dream. It's got a face like an owl and the aggression of a shark. Olaus Magnus placed this beast right off the coast of Iceland and Norway. That location is our biggest clue. Meet the real Xiphias, the orca. Let's break down the owl face. Orcas have distinctive white patches behind their eyes. From a distance on a wooden boat, those look like huge glowing eyes. And the fin? The Xiphias is drawn with a massive, sharp dorsal fin. A male orca's dorsal fin can stand 6 feet tall, straight up like a sword. And finally, the behavior. The map shows the Xiphias biting a seal in half. The aggression. Orcas are the only whales that actively hunt seals in this region. The mapmaker didn't invent a monster. He documented a predator. If you were in a 20-foot wooden rowing boat, an apex predator like an orca is a sea monster. The Rosmaris and the ice climber. This one is my favorite. The Rosmaris. It looks clumsy, almost comical. Legend says it would use its tusks to hang off cliffs and sleep while dangling over the ocean. It sounds absurd. Why would an animal sleep hanging by its teeth? But again, remove the exaggeration and you find the animal. This is a walrus. In the 1500s, people called them sea pigs. They used their tusks to haul their massive bodies onto ice, a behavior biologists call tooth walking. But here is where the geography matters. Olaus Magnus was in Rome. He had heard reports of climbing with teeth, but he likely never saw a glacier or an ice flow in person. To a Mediterranean artist, solid water doesn't make sense. So he drew what he knew, a rock cliff. It's not a myth, it's just a lost in translation moment of animal behavior. The great serpent, the sea orm. We can't talk about the Carta Marina without talking about him, the sea orm, the great serpent. This image alone is responsible for centuries of nightmares. The map description says this snake is 200 feet long and wraps itself around ships to crush them. For a long time, scientists dismissed this as pure fantasy, dragons of the sea. But let's look at the deep ocean. This is the giant oarfish. It's the longest bony fish in the world. They live in the deep, dark, crushing depths. But when they are sick or dying, they float to the surface. They can grow up to 36, maybe even 50 feet long. Now, look at the head. The oarfish has a bright red crest of rays that stick up like a crown, or a mane of hair. If you see a 50-foot silver ribbon with a red mane undulating on the surface, you aren't thinking fish. You are thinking sea serpent. While they don't eat sailors, their appearance at the surface was often seen as a bad omen by Vikings and later sailors. Once again, Olaus Magnus took a rare biological event and turned it into a permanent warning label. When we look at the Carta Marina today, we see that the monsters weren't just decorations. They were markers. They show us exactly where the currents were strongest, where the water was deepest, and where the biodiversity was highest.